I have been searching.
Welcome to Following the Fire, a podcast for Christians who are rethinking their faith and need a safe place to doubt. As we wander through the spiritual wilderness, we want to find and follow God wherever the pillar of fire leads.
And just like God's people in the Bible, we get lost, we miss the point, and we don't have all the answers. But maybe that's okay. We're on this journey together. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Steve.
Even on my heart can't compare with what you're worth.
Welcome back to Following the Fire. We have a special guest today. I'm excited to talk to Josh Kaiser, who I came across on TikTok. Josh, your stuff kind of started popping up. You got on just recently, didn't you? Just a few months ago, seems like.
Yeah, I think it started kind of getting more popular a couple months ago. I had been on TikTok for like a year before I created an account and just loved it and loved the community that I discovered on there. A lot of other, deconstructors on there that are just freaking brilliant,
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, I would like to share some stuff. So
yeah, well, I really liked your stuff because you have really some really deep thoughts and a really interesting way of looking at a lot of things. So your handle is Local Heretic, which is a great name.
the Local Heretic. Yep.
the Local Heretic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So why don't you kind of start us off by introducing yourself and talk about your journey through ministry and deconstruction to where you are now.
Yeah. So, I'm a father of 6 and a husband of 13 years. Almost now. I should probably get that right, huh? It's one of those two. And it's math, man. I do TikTok. I don't do math. So that's a great part of the intro. Now you know something about me, not a math guy. Anyway, I grew up Christian. My dad was always one of the best preachers in our church. They had kind of like a rotating preacher thing instead of like one single guy. I grew up watching everybody love him for sharing what he shared. And his secret sauce was kind of just getting up and, I mean, I always say he has more energy than God. So he just gets up there and he just starts going, and he's saying this stuff and this. He has no idea what he's going to say next, but he does it and people love it, and so it's like, it's very funny. But he instilled in me like at a very early age, he was like, I think you're going to be a pastor. And I, growing up, never really thought about it. But when I was 19, I had this fairly profound spiritual experience and had what I would call like a conversion moment. I was kind of a gym rat muscle dummy before that, and overnight went to like Wikipedia and literally just Googled list of theologians, Christian theologians, and got a list from like Origen and like St. Jerome, Justin Martyr, like early church dudes, all the way up to like mid 1900s. And then I just like started with the first one and bought his books and just read all the way
up. How old were you?
I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's rare.
So I was weird. Yeah, absolutely. My friends were like, you want to hang out? And I was like, no, I'm reading Augustine. And it was, yeah, I was not popular. Anyway, so that like really, that hunger and thirst for knowledge that kind of was awakened in that sort of spiritual experience, fed very neatly into the vein of evangelicalism that was popular at the time. One of the things that I, listened to for hours, was Mark Driscoll, Matt Chandler, Tim Keller, John Piper, like these guys. I worked at UPS at the time. I was loading trucks, and it was 4-hour shifts, and I would just pop my headphones in and listen to 4 or 5 sermons, and that was just like what I did. I would read, go to school, read a little bit more, go to work, listen to sermons, come home, read, go to bed. And that was just kind of like how it was. So anyway, all of that to say that those guys specifically, the Young Restless Reformed, like that was the mid 2000s. That was the thing. And this hunger and thirst for knowledge that I had really fed into like that Reformed theological movement at the time. They were all big into church planting. So then I was like, well, I'm big into church planting too. So I got involved in church plants. I had done 5 church plants by the time I left the ministry. 5, not like I had started them, but like I had worked in or had key volunteer roles in.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was a pastor for about 8 years, had almost 9 years. And the funny thing about it is that like I started out like as, you know, a guy who was cleaning toilets and stacking chairs. Like that was what I did. And by the end of it, I was like, had a decent, like a mid-sized church, and had like speaking invitations to regional pastors events. I had a podcast at the time that had like a lot of downloads, and it felt like this was it. Here I am. I am achieving my dream, and people loved me for one thing I got from my dad, just the authenticity and talking about my own life, and one part me, which was like the theology part of it. And like it was a winning formula, but my wife was not happy and was not being fulfilled in the church. And every part of my theology said that if I just told her the truth, and if she could just believe the truth, then she could be happy. Jesus could fill all her needs, and she would be fine. And in talking with her and really going through like some really hard conversations, one of the things that I realized is that the reason I liked this job was because it fed my ego like nothing else. I'm like, sometimes people will ask me like, why are the Pharisees like, why would they live like that? Why would they live like that? And my answer was always like, superiority is a drug. I mean, when you have high social status, it's like crack. It's addicting to be in spaces where you're so loved and worshipped. Loved is probably the wrong word. So
adored, admired.
Yeah, there you go. Adored and admired, listened to, valued. Anyway, all basic kind of human needs. But this realization was really core. I was like, so then I had to ask, why am I doing this? Why do I get up every week and have a 45-minute talk? You know, like what is this? And I started like reading outside of the Christian bubble. And, you know, we were foster parents, and we had several African-American kids in our home. And we thought it was really important to do like, you know, trainings on that because we're super white, and like it's important to support them in their development in the culture that they are born into. And so, you know, doing all of that and reading specifically Black theologians in the last 50 years really opened my eyes to the system that I was benefiting from, and also furthering, you know, like I was making sure the system stayed in place. And man, one of the things that I really got from my childhood was my dad. I still very much respect my dad. He's very, very evangelical Christian, but they have like an inner city ministry, and they do like people experiencing homelessness. They help out with them. They help get careers, and they're doing some cool stuff. But part of my childhood was like seeing people in need, seeing people oppressed, and doing something to fix it. And so the second that I started understanding all of the ways that white supremacy and colonialism worked into the job that I had that was feeding my ego, I could not sleep. I could not sleep at night. And I was just telling somebody the other day that like I had a migraine because the weather was changing, and I was like, the last time I had a migraine was when I was a pastor. I used to get them all the time.
Wow, really?
But I really think it's because I had this realization where I was like, this is wrong. What I am participating in is wrong.
Doing more harm than good.
Doing more harm than good. So that combined with theologically, I had already, because I had started like with the early church theologians, read their stuff, went all the way up. The perspective that I had on theology was very broad because shit changes, man. Like, I'm sorry, can we swear on this? I don't really know.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Ideas about Jesus and the Trinity and the nature of the Bible and how to interpret the Bible, and all like end times, all this stuff, it ebbs and flows with time. And when you read across church history and you respect John Wesley and you respect Tertullian and you really like, you read their stuff and you're like, man, these are smart guys. What happens is you're like, yeah, I don't know. We don't really know. These are smart people who are like saying very conflicting things. And, so I don't know. So I already had that like coming into like theology. So it's funny, like the theology part, I instinctively knew where all of the cracks were because I had read all of the historical debates and really didn't have much invested in the theology. It was pure ego.
Oh, interesting.
Sounds terrible to admit, but when my eyes were open to that, I was just like, oh fuck, man, we gotta do something about this. So
yeah. Oof.
Very heavy. But what basically happened then is that I also had a lot of church hurt surrounding that time. A couple leaders who I had a ton of respect for. Wanted to name one of my kids after, just completely shit hit the fan. And, we do not talk anymore. Like if I see him in public, I am very scared that he's going to yell at me, in public, make a scene, like I have a little trauma response there. Anyway, therapy's great, people. Go to therapy. Anyway.
Amen.
So, had a couple church hurt things. I was like, man, I got to get out of this job. And my wife, I had mentioned, wasn't happy. She had deconstructed and started identifying as like a Christo-pagan and very into witchy stuff, and started a business with she sells crystals and does Reiki, and so she started that business, and right about the same time I was like, okay, I can't do this job anymore for completely different reasons. Like I cannot do this. And I put my 2 weeks in. Well, she starts her business. Somebody finds out. And 2 weeks later, they fired me. And looking back, I was like so mad and so hurt by them. But it was the best thing. It really was the best thing they could have done for me.
Wow.
Because they just cold turkey, cut me clean, and I was gone. So, so that's kind of how I got out of ministry, which is a very long story. But it is what it is.
No, there are as I'm sitting here listening to you, that there are a creepy amount of similarities between you and me.
Yeah. Well, we've been getting along pretty good, so I could see something. There's some good chemistry here.
I mean, like my grandpa was a domestic missionary, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
He tried to plant churches all over the place, all over the Midwest, and so I was like entrenched in Bible and fundamentalist theology for my entire life. And I idolized him because I wanted to be like as smart in the Bible as grandpa was. And I got, 2 Bible degrees, and I was going to be a missionary, and we were missionaries in Germany for almost 4 years, and came back to the States unplanned. We planned to stay there forever, right? And fix Germany, save them all. And then we came back for lots of different reasons, and became really involved in the church just as volunteers. And I kind of became that guy at church that everybody wanted to go to my classes. And so I'm like, I know stuff.
I'm pretty cool.
And everybody wanted me to like lead worship and all the stuff. And I got so sucked into that, and I loved it so much that I told myself I'm doing this because I really want to serve, and I think I did, and that was part of it for sure. but I kind of loved it. And so I didn't realize that, honestly, until we left. And now I'm at a very super progressive church. And, but there's a lot, it's different. And I'm new. I'm the new guy. And I didn't realize how much I had lost that ego boost every Sunday, which is not what you should be having on a Sunday morning at church. You're not going there for an ego boost, right?
Yeah, but that's like so the culture. It's like it is what it's about. And the people, like if they don't, the people who come and attend church, at least in the brand of church that I was in, it really, really, honestly, it was not about like growing your relationship with Jesus. It was about making you feel better about the world around you and about what you're experiencing in your life. Yeah. And there's definitely space for that. And I mean, it's important, but that was all it was. And that's why they came. So like I was there for the ego boost. They were there for something a little comforting, and there was a great transaction. It worked for a while.
Yeah. So now you deconstructed your an ex-Christian, you'd say, or?
So I do actually still identify as Christian. It's kind of rare that I'll share my beliefs. I do have some videos on them. I'll bridge the gap there. So basically, I leave the ministry, been on TikTok for a while, really enjoy and love the deconstruction community on TikTok. Like that, like I would die for so many of those people, honestly. Like I love those people. And I started making videos one day. It was kind of cathartic, honestly. I was like, I got fired, guys. Wah, wah, wah. Like that was kind of, if you go back far enough on my channel, that's what you'll see. And realized, very quickly that I set the things that I was saying were helping other people, and like the journey that I was on and sharing where I was at just in that moment, was what like other people were like, wow, I've never seen it this way before. And this perspective is really, so people were like, wow, this is very helpful. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can do something good with this. Okay, sweet, let's do it. You
still like to help people, even if you're not a pastor, right?
Exactly. And it is just kind of social media is like this for everybody, but it's just kind of like a weird outlet for what I'm thinking through. And anyway, it's really interesting to me. But I started making deconstruction content, and actually I met with my dad. He's like, hey, I'm concerned about you, son, and we need to get breakfast. And I was like, oh, fuck. Here we go. So we got breakfast, and to my surprise, he didn't bring anything up, but he was like, have you thought about life coaching? Because it's just like being a pastor, basically, and you don't need an education for it, which is like a weird thing to say, but it's true. Yeah. And so I was like, I hadn't thought about life coaching, but I wonder if like people would want like help deconstructing. Like, I wonder if I could help them with that. And so I was like, well, the only way to find out is to try. So I launched my coaching business, and was shocked at how many people do want that.
Really?
And it's been, honestly, that is like, I like TikTok, and I like when you're a content creator on TikTok and your video does really well, it feels really good. It does.
Sure.
But the thing that I think is the most meaningful thing in my life is meeting with people one-on-one and just figuring out where they're at and where they're stuck and where they're struggling with, and giving them potential paths forward. My kind of coaching philosophy is that I want to support you in what you believe, because so much of what evangelicalism is removing your autonomy and telling you what you have to believe and how you have to behave. Yeah. And so I see my role as somebody who's in your corner, who can help you figure out what that is. And I have zero, because I'm not a pastor, I have zero investment in where you end up. But I can help you work through some of those stuff. So anyway, it is one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done with my life, and I feel great about it.
That's great to find that, deconstruction or not. I mean, that's great to find that niche.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a good time. It's a crazy time. It's weird to think that this is what I do now, especially to think where I was 2 years ago, but here I am. So
Wow. And what's the name of your practice?
Yes. So the practice is called Vivant Coaching, Vivant Life Coaching. So it's Vivant. It's a French word. It means it's like the quality of having life or being alive.
Right.
So I was like, life coaching, alive life coaching, feel alive. And I was like, no, this is stupid. And it sounds like Life
Aliveness.
Church. Yeah, exactly. So my brother took me to this brewery in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where he lives. It's called Brewery Vivant. And I was like, that's a sweet name. That's so cool. And their beer was so good. It was so good. So I was like, yeah. So I was kind of like
That's
a
really
little
funny.
bit tipsy, and I was like, this is it. This is the name. This is what I'm doing. So that's how I came up with that name. But Vivant, Vivant, lifecoaching.com. You can get more information there. So.
The air fills my lungs. The summer sun brings growth, and the winter cold gives rest. Crunchy leaves feel good beneath my feet, and I'm just not sure I have to know it all.
So you asked, if I like identify as an ex-Christian. Honestly, where I personally am at, I really can't deny spirituality and the existence of something greater than myself. There's a lot of atheists and agnostics that follow me and really like to challenge me on that, and I deeply appreciate it. But the truth is, it is just a subjective thing. They're right. There is no objective evidence for this, and I cannot prove it to them. But whatever it is that I believe, and however it is that I connect to the divine, to God, whatever you want to call it, it's super meaningful to me. And I was having this conversation with my brother, who is an atheist, and he was just like, man, I have really been learning to like reparent myself, and like we've just been going through this thing in therapy. It's been really great. And I was like, this sounds a lot like how I see spirituality. And I almost sometimes I'm like, I wonder if it's the same thing. I don't really care what it is. That doesn't bother me, like the existence of something more. I just know what's right in front of me. I just know what I know. And what I know is that, again, what I know, and I'm not going to, this is why I don't like to share a lot, because I don't want people to feel like they have to believe what I believe, or, I want them
or
to
that your
achieve.
belief is a goal in any way.
Exactly. Because it makes me feel like I'm a pastor again. It really irks me, like to the core of my being.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
But that caveat being shared, I do feel comfortable sharing that, I identify as like a Christian mystic, and Christian mysticism is something that's like really, I think, profound and beautiful. It's been extremely helpful to me, feeling like, making strides like in therapy while using spirituality to like get there. I don't know. Like the thing is, like, it works for me. So that's what it is.
Yeah, I remember I was a little while ago, a few days ago, maybe you had a video about that on TikTok about where do you start with the Christian mysticism thing. And when I first heard that term Christian mysticism, I'm like, come on, what?
Yeah.
It's it's like an oxymoron. But
Yeah.
the more I looked into it, I've mentioned 1,000 times on this podcast, it seems like now, that I really like the writings of John Philip Newell.
Oh, dude, JPN, man, that guy.
I got to
That's
meet
my
him.
guy.
He was here in Fort Collins. He spoke at our church.
Whoa.
And he's agreed to be on the podcast at some point. Don't tell anybody.
Ooh.
So I'll try to get him on sometime soon. But
That's so cool, man.
I remember I was very much in the place of, I don't even know what I believe anymore. I'm still kind of there, but I went to this evening where they had him at our church, and the ministers at our church are all very connected with the mystical type of thing. It's a United Church of Christ, so very
Gotcha. Yep.
Progressive. And our church has like Celtic Christianity meetups and stuff like that. I'm like, Celtic what? I mean,
Yeah.
you like sit around and talk in the Irish accents or something.
And drink whiskey.
So
Hell yeah!
but
man.
I went to the evening of him talking about his new book, and it just like blew my mind in so many ways, and it just connected with me so deep.
Well,
And
that guy, man, if you haven't read any John Philip Newell, you've got to. I might even have his book in my car.
Oh, really?
Oh no, it's my other backpack. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big JPN guy, so absolutely.
Yeah, and I really appreciate how you are approaching that from your direction. As far as, once again, it's kind of like mine, but I also feel like I know there's something there. I get this, once again, can't prove it or disprove it, but the things that I have learned over the past couple of years have opened my eyes to so many things that I've had to let go because they have been disproven.
Right.
And that's hard to do. I mean, where do you start with, I mean, it's like living with cognitive dissonance here every day. It's just getting worse. It seems like sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like part of what happens when people begin to deconstruct, and I really like how Pete Enns, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bible for Normal People, but Pete Enns talks about how deconstruction is something that happens to you, not something that you like choose to go through.
Right.
But speaking to what you said about cognitive dissonance, I mean, I think that there's a moment, and I have it like in my story, where you wake up a little bit and you're just like, oh shit, this is probably most likely not true. Yeah. And it sometimes it starts like a trickle, and it can be a couple months where you're fine, and it hits you again. And a couple months and another round of it. Sometimes it's like to use a Christian word, the floodgates open. Right. And it's just, you feel like you're drowning, and it's so disorienting. Most of the people, like if I have like a first time person that I'm coaching, the most common word that they will use is the word lost. I feel so lost. Yeah. And totally. that hits home because, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you live your entire life making sense of your life through the lens of this story that the church has given you, that makes the whole world make sense. People sin, so that's why there's evil. God is good, and that's why I have sunshine and Cheerios and Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Cinnamon Toast Crunch is objectively better. But anyway, cereal snob here. So anyway, right. And like even that example is funny, but it really hits the nail on the head, because like even the most mundane, simple things, you tell yourself that is from God. And so you have this whole world view. Your entire perspective is based on this narrative, this story that the church gave you. And as soon as it stops making sense, then the way that you've made sense of the world your entire life just comes crashing down. And yeah, you feel lost because that story told you what to do next and where to go next. And if you don't know what to do, pray some more and, go to the pastor, whatever. Like that story gave your life a future. And then when you deconstruct, all of a sudden you can't see 2 steps ahead of you anymore. And you feel super lost.
Yeah. You've had this thing that was your anchor to hold on to. And then it's like, what do I hold on to now?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's rough.
It is. Yeah.
So one of the things that leads me to what I want to talk to you most about tonight was, I think that you've got a lot of experience from not only yourself and your wife, but through your practice of talking to all these different people, going through different directions of and paths through deconstruction. Mm-hmm. When I hear the term deconstruction, sometimes it's used to mean I have deconstructed my faith. It means I've tossed it away and I'm completely gone. I'm like something else now. Sometimes it means other things. Like what do you see from your perspective as maybe the large buckets that people kind of find themselves in at the end? Or if there is an end, I mean,
Yeah. So, I mean, I like your phrase of large buckets. I think that while everybody's deconstruction journey is very, very different. And like going into deconstruction coaching, I was like, well, I've got this 5-step process and you're just going to go through step 1 and then 2. Yeah. What happens is like you start meeting with somebody and you realize that there is no one size fits all strategic plan for your deconstruction. It is different for every single person. However, that being said, there are some huge generalities, big buckets, like you said, that people can fit into. And you also said, like, if it ever is over.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to, if there's somebody who's listening to this who is like, man, this is me, like I'm really struggling through it. And I just want to know what the 5-step process is to get out of it and where I'm going to end up. Yeah, I just cannot tell you. I cannot tell, because I just don't know. And will it ever end? I don't know. Like I know so many people who quote unquote deconstructed 20 years ago, and they still struggle with thoughts of going to hell just driving down the street. You know, like if I get in a car crash, I'm gonna go to hell. Or finding, like, waking up and realizing that your significant other went out to grab coffee or something and you don't know where they are, and then you're like, did the rapture happen? Like this wow. Like end times obsessive thinking. So there are people who are still struggling with this like 20 years later. So I don't mean to burst anybody's bubble. I really do. I do want to offer some hope. I really do think that you can work, and I do mean that word, work, to uncondition the beliefs that you have had for however long you've been in church, and then recondition your mind to support a belief system, a perspective that is more authentic to you. So that being said, what are the generalities? Like where do people end up? So when I started deconstruction coaching, I was like, here's what's going to happen. Everybody's going to go through this program that I have, and then probably they're all just going to be atheist agnostic. That's probably what's going to happen. That's not true. At least in anecdotally in my sample size. What most people in my experience want is to come to a place where they can still have the parts of faith that they really, really do identify with, like deep to their core. Like that is authentically who they are. Similar to kind of like what you and I were sharing, like there is something undeniable to us. When there is, within Christianity, there's so many things that are deniable, but there's just like maybe 2 things that are just I know this deep in my bones. So anyway, when a lot of people move from evangelicalism to, just like you, like a progressive church, like progressive Christianity.
Right.
The interesting thing about that is that depending on where you live, finding a progressive church is very difficult, because what a lot of people got out of evangelical church, progressive church, sometimes intentionally, does not do.
Oh, 100%.
Yes. And so very often what they're looking for is like Christianity 2.0, evangelicalism 2.0. And we have to work through that, because the truth is that just like people who grow up with an abusive parent can often feel very close to that parent and like want a relationship with that parent, and maybe act in some unhealthy ways and do some mental gymnastics to justify the actions of that parent so that they can still have a relationship with that parent. Just like that, we can do that with the church. And so, yeah, the worship night service where you cried for a half an hour when they played Defender, or I don't know, whatever song is popular now. I don't Gyra. Right when I left, it was like Gyra. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, like that worship night where you got the goosebumps, that may not happen anymore in a more healthy spirituality, because progressive churches, for the most part, aren't trying to manipulate you through a church service so that you can feel some sort of catharsis and leave. What happens when you move out of evangelicalism into like a progressive faith, very often, these are very general, is that you have to figure out a way to have a meaningful spirituality within yourself. The church cannot be the place where you get that. It can help you. It can help you, and it can be meaningful, and it can be so great. But the truth is that if you leave one abusive parent for another, that's just what you're doing, you know?
Yeah, I remember when I was talking to, before we joined the church we're at now, I was talking to the senior minister, and I said, I come from a very strict background, very, very strict, like a cappella music only, all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And
I said, we like what you guys are about, like social justice, things like that. But I'm like, I've kind of developed some pretty weird ideas about Jesus. And he's like, Steve, trust me, I've got weirder ideas. And that's kind of a safe, it maybe made a much more safe space, because it wasn't not so much, it was like just the accepting nature of things was surprising. And it's almost, it was so different that I kind of didn't know what to do with it almost.
Yeah. So I think that's a really great example of this, because you're saying, I had some ideas, I came to some beliefs myself, and I found a place where I'm accepted. That is so beautiful. That's perfect. When people immediately leave evangelicalism, one of the things that they very often have to work through, and again, this is not a one-size-fits-all thing, but very often, is like, that's what you have to do. You have to do the work. You have to like come to beliefs that you believe. Because again, if you're just sucking on the belief teat from evangelicalism,
oh, sorry,
it's okay. And they're just feeding you what to believe, and then you liked that, and so you're looking for that, but without the racism. Like, that's not what it is. That's not what it is, and that's not a pathway to like meaningful spirituality. You're just doing the same thing. What evangelical church does is take away your autonomy. This is like the kind of the core thing. And if you go to some place where you don't want to be in charge of yourself and what you believe, you want somebody to tell you, you're just not going to be happy. And that's not how a lot of progressive churches work. So, and rightly so.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to put it, as far as like being fed the thing to believe. Like, I thought I was very in touch with spirituality and things like that until I left, and then I'm like, I was parroting the party line, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm figuring this out. Like, spirituality is a bigger thing than I ever imagined it was, which makes it all confusing again,
Yes.
Like hacking my own way through the jungle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I would love to know, when you kind of left and walked away, did you have to like deal with having a sense of certainty, like not having it anymore? And
100%.
Yeah. How did you do that, do you think?
How did I deal with it?
I just flipped the script.
That's fine.
Script. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quit being a life coach, man.
Yes.
No,
my bad.
So how did I deal with it?
Yeah. How did you deal with not being certain anymore?
It's not like it was a cutoff at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
We left for some very specific reasons, and mostly like Black Lives Matter, women in the church, and LGBTQ issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that distanced us from some people. And so at first it was like a loss of connection and loneliness, and even with my own family. And then it became, it's like I slowly lost the thing that was my constant and the thing I could hold on to. So as it slowly slipped away, if it was a situation where I woke up one day, I'm like, oh crap, I don't have anything to hold on to. I don't know how to deal with that. But the fact that it was a kind of a slow slipping away, I remember waking up one morning, I'm like, I don't know what to hold on to. But kind of coming back out the other side, I'm kind of still down there a little bit. But so dealing with it as far as that goes, that's what kind of led me into looking at people like Richard Rohr and John Philip Newell, and so I dealt with it by finding other people who have dealt with it.
Yes.
Really. And TikTok.
And TikTok.
No?
Heck yeah, man. Yeah. So like I asked that because I think something, at least to me, if I'm like sitting down with you and we're chatting, something that tells me that you're pretty far along on your deconstruction journey is that you've realized that you don't need that certainty anymore, or maybe you're just never going to have it, and so you're not trying to get it anymore, because that's really what evangelicalism is about. It's selling you certainty. It's a transaction. They give you this like feeling that this story makes the whole world make sense, and you can believe it and you can be certain of it, and that is so comforting. And in that transaction, that's what you get, but you give them authority over your life, and they get to tell you what to believe and how to behave. And this transaction, when you deconstruct, all of a sudden you don't have that certainty anymore. And like when I'm very generally talking about like the first part of deconstruction for many people is this like hump of, I'm never going to have the level of certainty about spirituality that the church gave me. I'm never going to have that again. And realizing that is a huge, huge step. And so that's why like a lot of people land in progressive church, because just like you said, you arrived at some beliefs that you have yourself that maybe are a little bit weird. And the church was like, sweet, come on in, man. Like that's progressive. That's church. That is church. That's good shit. That's what I'm saying. So that's like the first big bucket, is like what does life look like after deconstruction? A lot of people find a progressive church in town. So.
I do not know exactly what God wants of me. He's only told me how to act towards you. And I'm too far separated from the men who wrote the law. Stand before you pointing out your flaws.
So continue on with the buckets.
With the buckets. Yeah, and I want to be clear, this is not like a place, this is not like a step-by-step thing. So this is like where generally people land. So again, this is my opinion, but I think that deconstruction is about finding a belief set or a narrative of the world perspective that is most authentic to who you are. So your deconstruction journey, quote unquote, is over, quote unquote, when you find like a way to be, and I mean that like in like a more mystic sense, like
a contentment.
Yeah, well, like a contentment, but also like a way to live and exist in the world that is authentic, that is truly authentic to you. And in many ways that's not done because it's never done because we're ever evolving and ever learning and ever growing. So that's why like the end after deconstruction, I don't know, man. I think this is a lifelong process, and anyway, I could talk about that. So here, anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, the second big bucket where I think a lot of people end up is the spiritual but not religious crowd. That's how I would label this. So in this, you would have, like, I feel like I identify with this. Organized religion to me is like, it's triggering. Maybe I'll get to a point where I can do this, but like going to church is hard. And so there's that. And I think that a lot of, if people like deconstruct and then go to the progressive church and try it out, a lot of times they want to do it, but then they go and it's triggering. It is because it can be, and it can be because what happened to you in evangelical church was so traumatizing that going and being a part of organized religion again might not be for you for a while or forever. It's okay, Yeah. And so, but these people definitely still want to be spiritual, and they definitely still like know that there's something out there. So I identify with this as like kind of Christian mystic that's not really into a church per se. and my wife identifies as a Christo-pagan, which is like she's finding other ways to have spirituality and have spiritual rituals and a structure for connection that is wedded to Jesus. So there's so many people who like are like mixing some Buddhist practices in with Christianity and finding a lot of meaning in that. So these are like spiritual people, but not, and they're kind of religious because they're still finding ways to express their spirituality, and it's such a high value to them that they're finding ways to structure their lives around it. But it's not a like organized religion place. Does that make? Am I making?
Yeah,
sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because there's thousands of ways to express that need, or I should say, fulfill that need of spiritual connection. And some people find that through nature. Some people find that through going to a room with lots of other people who are kind of the same. And
yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I think that's like the second bucket where people end up. The third, again, overly general but big bucket, is what I think a lot of people think of. This is what a lot of Christians think when you're saying deconstruction. It's like the atheist agnostic camp. And these are people that to them, if you're agnostic, you can still have a lot of spirituality in your life and you still believe in spirituality many times. But you just don't know what it is, and and you're comfortable with that. And honestly, that's great. Honestly, that's great for you.
Being okay with not knowing.
Exactly.
And not worried about it.
Exactly. It's not bothering you. And what is most authentic to you is to say, I've got no idea, man. I don't know, but I like it. It's okay. Like that's a great place to be. And, for a lot of atheist people, again, what is most authentic to them is that there is no such thing as divine, a divinity. There's no spiritual realm. And that really makes sense to them. And moving from like an evangelical to atheist is what I expected to encounter all the time, but it is actually like the least
really
the least common thing in my practice, in my experience. Right. So, but it is still like we I still have several clients who that's how they identify, and that like we find ways to find meaning after spirituality. And this is something that I think a lot of Christians, a lot of evangelicals think. It's just like, how could you possibly have peace and hope and comfort without Jesus or without spirituality? And the thing is, like, I know so many people who do. It's possible.
Yeah, and honestly, that way back when I was a kid, I remember being taught in church, as most of us were, that it is impossible to have a fulfilled life and be content with your life and without this close personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
But then I started meeting people, like in real life. I'm like, they have that. And like the fruit of the Spirit, only Christians, right? Well,
wrong.
I mean, it's like Gandhi. I remember watching the Gandhi as a kid, and my parents like rented it. I think it was probably on 2 VHS tapes, and one of the long movies. I remember watching that. I'm like, this guy is like Christian.
Yeah,
but he's not. What's going on here?
Right. It is entirely possible to have a meaningful life and to have purpose and a sense of self-worth and identity without any sense of spirituality. It is possible. And I know because I've seen it. So, and I think that like what holds a lot of people up, at least in evangelicalism, is that they think if you're going to start deconstructing, then you're going to not believe in anything. And part of my pushback is like, is that so bad? Like it is possible. It is possible to have a meaningful life afterwards. So,
yeah, it is. It's when you're talking to the people who are preaching on Sunday morning, it is bad.
Yeah.
It's worse. I remember, like the song "Oh Sacred Head." Do you know that one? The old hymn. It's beautiful. Like it's like Bach arranged the music to it, and it's just gorgeous.
Oh, interesting.
One of the lines is, "Oh, let me never outlive my love for thee." And it's like one of my professors at one point said in Bible college, he's like, when you're singing that song, what you're saying is, if I ever start to leave Jesus, please kill me first.
Ooh.
I'm like, oh, it's pretty heavy.
Yep.
And that's the mindset for a lot of Christians, and especially evangelicals and fundamental Christians, when that is the only way to live and no other way, then when your friend, child, whatever, leaves that and starts believing and professing and teaching another thing, or even like what we're discussing now is like some of the people listening to this, I know are still very connected to the church in different ways. And it sounds like we're saying, whatever.
Right.
And just that idea is that we're now into false prophet area, and we're false teachers, and we're lambs and wolves in sheep clothing, whatever.
Yep, wolves in sheep clothing. Yep, that was almost my my TikTok handle because I got called that so much. I was like, I'm just going to lean into it, I guess.
So we have the progressive Christian bucket and the spirituality without a religion bucket, and then folks who end up agnostic or atheist. Go continue.
Well, I was just saying those are the three major buckets, and obviously there's so many ways to demarcate within those three buckets. Different sort of beliefs. I know a bunch of people who say I'm agnostic but very spiritual, much like it seems like we use the word spectrum to refer to a lot of things. Yeah. Now, I really do think that this is kind of a spectrum where you can have multiple different beliefs, and it's okay. It's okay.
A spectrum as opposed to just a linear
scale. As a linear progression. Yeah, exactly. You can land anywhere on this spectrum here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think one more thing I wanted to say about atheists / agnostics is that when you land in that camp, the people who've spent a lot of time there that I personally know, their ethics and morals are so much more, like, ironically Christ-like, because have you heard the vertical versus horizontal morals analogy?
Refresh my memory.
It's all right. So basically how this goes is that in vertical morality, you have a being who is above you, who knows more than you, is more powerful than you, and tells you what is right and wrong. In horizontal morality, it's based on the people around you.
Yes.
And when you're an atheist and you still want to be a good person, like 99.999% of atheists do, you have to find a way to value human life and have that inform how you see the world. And because your standard is no longer a being who's above you, who knows everything and can just tells you what to do, your standard now is humanity and how I treat humanity and human flourishing. And because of that, these are the most generous people that I know. These are the most grateful and gracious people that I know. Because they're not worried about offending a higher power. So I feel like, especially with like church people, it's important to let them know that the caricature of atheist that church often gives them just is wrong. I mean, just get to know some. Not on the internet. Don't
get to know anybody on the internet.
No. but find some in real life, and it's incredibly different.
That's a fascinating point that you make, because the more I let go of the Bible as the end all be all of everything, because I grew up basically worshiping the Bible. The more I lean into that and realizing that the onus is more on me to figure out like what is moral, and then I'm having to pay a lot more attention to people around me. I'm having to ask myself, is what I'm doing hurting other people? Whereas before, I just like, did the Bible say X, Y, Z? Whatever. If it didn't say it, then I don't have to worry about it. But if when I'm looking around next to me, I see people who are hurting, and I'm like, these people need help. It doesn't matter what letters are after their name or whatever. They just need help.
Yeah, exactly. Or how they identify or what they believe. They just, it's
the
worth
irony.
It's worth helping people. It's worth being a good person. You don't need to have the threat of punishment in order to be a good person.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Talk about unlearning some things, right?
Absolutely. Dude, one of my biggest TikTok videos was talking about how I came to the point where I no longer believed in hell. And what was so fascinating about that video to me was the amount of Christians that commented and were basically like, well, why be good then? Why not sin? Like, why not? And it was so eye-opening to me how, because I used to be that person, how blind I was to the inherent value of just loving somebody else as a goal in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember
that threat of punishment thing's big.
Back in my Steve's school teacher days, I taught a class at our church about the afterlife. And our tradition has never had any connection to like end time stuff or rapture or anything like that. It's always kind of hand waved away. And Revelation's just about Rome or whatever. And but the idea of heaven and hell is very, very real. And I taught through this entire class, and I did a lot of deep study on myself. And I was kind of at the time I was at the point of like annihilationism. That if you're bad at the end of time, you just go poof, and you're like you never existed. And then you have to start thinking about like God pulls the memories of you out of people's heads, or it's weird, it's like anyway. But I remember teaching the class and going through all these verses about how Jesus never said anything about eternal hell. It's not in the Bible at all this thing, and what eternal means and all that. And at the end of it, I'm like, so is there an eternal punishment, et cetera, et cetera? And this guy's like, yeah. I'm like, you missed it.
I just went through it. I just went through it, man. Like,
yeah.
Where were you?
And I'm like, did you?
That's so funny.
Yeah. That seems to be a huge one for people. I mean, there's so many creators on TikTok who are in the Bible sphere or the deconstruction sphere, and anytime they start talking about hell, people just get really upset.
Yeah, well, this is because what Christians, what modern white evangelicals worship, isn't Jesus. It's like this sort of like revenge porn idea of hell and the end times, and it's all superiority. It's just like I said, superiority is a drug, and like the feeling that other people are going to hell makes you feel better about yourself, and that's really what I think it is. And
we're gonna see it play out.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't know if we want to get into politics, but absolutely. So
our last two episodes have been about politics, so it's so
nice. Okay, so we're good then. Yeah, no, that's exactly it, and it like informs how they want to vote and how they want to see the world, and it's pretty crazy. And again,
dark.
Like it's pretty dark. You look at it and you're just like, is this about something positive or is this about something negative? And I just think more often than not, it's about something negative. It's about being against things, and it's about it's not about standing for something. It's about putting other people down so you can feel better about yourself. That's my opinion, but that's just me.
Yeah, and I remember you did two videos just recently that just I loved so much. Sent them to everybody I knew about like you mentioned earlier about the transactional nature of church and things like that. And like it was either the one before or after talking about how the sense of certainty, like you mentioned earlier, and how that's just going to be gone, and how people are like, how in the world can you find peace and comfort without this world, this kind of a, and your response was, I kind of wonder how you can find it within that world. And that's kind of what you're saying is there's this structure built around it that is so spiky, and it feels like from the inside that it's fine, but it's like a cage and you can't get out. And
yes. When you are motivated by, let's just call it hate, because that's what it is. When you're motivated by stopping the gay agenda, when you're motivated by preserving white supremacy in America, when you're motivated by maintaining misogynistic worldview, like when that is your life, there just cannot be a way that you are content or at peace or have joy. I mean, I just think it's impossible. I think it's impossible. So yeah, the question is like, how do you have that in that? How do you watch Fox News all day and be like, you know what, I'm just full of the Holy Spirit right now and I feel really great about my life and I just feel very content. You know, it's like, I don't know how people, I don't know. Well, I do know what it is they feel superior and they're trying to preserve systems where they feel superior, and that is what makes them feel better. So, but it's not a way to live, man. Being against everything and everybody is not a way to live. Yeah,
and moving away from doesn't make us perfect either. So
absolutely,
we're trying. I feel like all of us, trying to sum up the whole thing. I feel like people going through this deconstruction thing, like you said, it happens to you. Mm-hmm. I didn't wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to tear apart my family and my community and my friends.
You know what I want is a really bad Thanksgiving. This is going to be great.
Right. I need some stress on top of COVID,
Exactly.
But it happens to you, and I'm still the same person who I long for to have a fulfilling life and to help others and to etc. Mm-hmm. And the things that I have been taught as a child to search for the truth and question the things you're taught, that led me here.
Yeah.
And so people, I think, that are going through deconstruction, wherever they end up, I think it's important that we as onlookers or participants in it understand that this is something that it's deep, mm-hmm. and it's hard, and it's usually a very honest thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to this and you are not going through deconstruction, but someone is, be patient. Mm-hmm. Have some patience with them and the whole situation.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of a book I read from, I think it was from the 80s. It was on politics in the 80s. But they quoted a Harvard, what do they call it when you graduate at the top of your class and you give that speech?
Valedictorian.
Oh, thank you. That's the word. It was like a valedictorian speech from the 60s, from like all this political unrest in the 60s. And basically what this kid said was, our values came from you. It came from, if you're sitting out there and you're a parent, our values came from you. Yeah. And you're mad about how we're expressing those, but please remember that it's the same values. And I really believe that a lot of people who are deconstructing, they value the love of Jesus. Mm-hmm. They value the fruits of the Spirit of peace and joy and gratitude, thankfulness, gentleness. When's the last time you heard a sermon on being gentle? That is not like in the evangelical church. But my point is that if you have somebody in your life who is deconstructing and you feel like you are still very much into church and evangelicalism or whatever expression you have, I want you to know that there are so many points of connection that you still have with that person who is deconstructing in your life. Very, very likely they are just deconstructing because of the values that you share. And you can still have a meaningful relationship with them.
That is fabulous. Well, let's end it there. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
Dude, I feel the same. This is great. This is super fun.
Yeah. So remind us where we can find your stuff and what you have going on.
Absolutely. I have a lot going on, so buckle up, Buttercup, because here we go. So
I'll put all this in the show notes as well, too.
Okay, thanks, man. So I'm at the Local Heretic Live on TikTok. I have weekly lives on Tuesday nights where I interview other deconstruction content creators on TikTok. And it's so good. It's so fast. I love it. And then I release that in podcast form as well, which is called the Local Heretic Live. That's what the lives are. So Local Heretic Live. Okay. Anyway, that's the podcast. I also have a deconstruction coaching business. That's called Vivant Life Coaching. You can find it at vivantlifecoaching.com, VIVANT lifecoaching.com. And you can also schedule an appointment there or just find more information on what deconstructing coaching is.
Cool. Yeah, well, I'm going to have you back sometime. Maybe talk about some Christian mysticism stuff.
Dude, I would love that. I would love that so much. That's like a part of me that I don't share a lot, and I would love to do that. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
So, any book recommendations? What I want to start doing is asking all of our guests for recommend a book or two for in any genre, realm, or whatever.
Book recommendations. I think one of the easiest ways, like just talking about Christian mysticism, one of the easiest first like examples of it, like a first encounter rather is what I'm trying to say, encounter with it, could be like Thomas Merton and Richard Rohr, although Richard Rohr is famously a terrible writer. I hope he never hears me say that, but it's no good. His voice though, if you can hear his listen to his talks, I can't even do it justice. His voice is amazing. So it's much easier to listen to him than just to read him. But I always suggest The Naked Now, Richard Rohr, what was his book on the Cosmic Christ or the Universal Christ?
Universal Christ.
Thank you. So good. And he also has, I think it's, I'm going to forget the title. But it's like basically the 12 steps, like AA and spirituality, a lot of mysticism in that. It's really, really, really good. Really good. So, John Philip Newell. Google John Philip Newell and buy all his books. Just do it. Do it right now.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Josh. Appreciate your time and catch up with you later.
That sounds great, man. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. Check the show notes for more info and links to the stuff we mentioned. And if you want to support the show, you can join at patreon.com/followingthefire. And a very special thanks to Daniel Wheat for our music. You can find more of his work on Spotify, Bandcamp, and more. Links also in the show notes. And for all the links and info, all in one spot, go to followingthefire.com. See you next time.
Don't you know it's all I have? Even on my heart can't compare with what you're worth. I have been running almost all my life, but you always chase me down.